and he's missing his arms and his legs, and he's bled out a lot, and he's going in and out of consciousness.
I drove and with siren, everything, but I was alone.
Over 300 terrorists, armed terrorists, with RPGs, with AK-47s and grenades, and the battle there eventually only ended 3 days later. Hi, I'm Dovie Maisel, Vice President of Operations for United Hatzalah.
And I'm Elad Bachar, the head of the medical division.
And welcome back to Masters of Emergency on this very special series that we're doing on October 7th, unfolding events 1 year ago. We just said goodbye to Avi, who was with us on the previous episode talking about the medical evacuations and the helicopters and the operations in the field. And I feel lucky. I feel lucky that we were able to get one of our true heroes, not only of our true heroes, of Israel's true heroes, Dr. Shlomo Gensler, who will introduce himself, but share with him his perspective of his encounters on this very horrific and challenging day. And you know what? Maybe I'll just hand it over to you, Shlomo,
okay,
or
thank
doctor.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there. I'll just say that we're now at 5:30 p.m. on October 7th, and we'll take it from there. We'll continue unfolding.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a part of this wonderful organization. And just to give a little bit of a background, the context of who I am and how I fit into this day that came to be the infamous day of October 7th. My name is Dr. Shlomo Gensler. I hail originally from the United States and Canada. I grew up both in the New York tri-state area and in Montreal, Canada. And then after a long progression, I made my way through all my education and became a doctor. But what was the impetus that got me to become a physician was through emergency medicine, was the starting working in 911 in the United States, where I worked for both FDNY, which is the Fire Department of New York City, as an EMT, and then also in various 911 systems around the tri-state area. And then that sparked the interest. I had a degree in business, and that sparked an interest in, joining the field of medicine. And then I was crazy enough to go through the long medical school training, and then as well to become an anesthesiologist. And I spend a lot of time in the intensive care, which is where I came from just now.
And thank you for making the time, because I think it's a real opportunity for everyone to get to know you, and more than that is hear your story.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. So just to give a little context of what happened that day. So first of all, I'm a father of 4 lovely children, and I'm married to another physician who understands my craziness and my desire for action and medicine. And so she's extremely supportive of it. So just on a day-to-day basis, I've been part of this organization, I think now close to 9 years. And throughout it, I've been this organization is an amazing organization that does a tremendous amount of innovation in pre-hospital emergency care, which very few organizations do this much innovation.
Maybe I'll just jump in for a second. For those of you listeners or viewers who are just watching the podcast for the first time, I'll just give 2 words about the organization. United Hatzalah is a volunteer-based EMS service in Israel, the largest one of the biggest ones in the world, actually. Over 7,000 volunteers, doctors, paramedics, EMTs that operate from the community and perform first response on ambucycles and ambulances and helicopters and everything, and in order to bridge the gap that it takes for ambulances to get there.
So even to emphasize even more on this, it's a lot of volunteer organizations and even professional EMS organizations don't have as much devices for all the different type of resources that there are. So for example, I'm a physician, so it's utilizing the tools and the abilities of each individual provider. For example, this organization organization, we have midwives who are, specialize in birthing things. There's OBGYNs who are able to provide, female care in different ways. So it's a very unique organization that it brings together tremendous amounts of different fields all into one thing. So in my particular situation, I deal a lot with intensive care and advanced life support. So the organization came up with this brilliant idea to build basically an SUV, sport utility vehicle, which is all the bells and whistles of everything advanced life support, aside from being a very comfortable car and easy to use and built with the drawers and the latest technologies inside of it. It also has all the most advanced medical care. And on a day-to-day basis, I use it in the Jerusalem area to respond to many different types of calls, whether it's terror attacks, whether it's the routine cardiac arrest or difficulty breathing or anaphylactic reaction, which is a severe allergic reaction. There's many times, where, and even for example, this past, Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish high holiday, went out on over 26 calls, just responding to advanced life support calls.
Basically what you're saying is you're either on the job in the hospital or you're on the job in the community.
Yes, but that's the beauty of this organization, is that this is what it's all about. Even when we're sitting within the community, we're able to use the skills that we have and be able to do that outside.
Truly innovative and very special. So I just want to we've been going through this very. I'm trying to think of the word for this day, especially the 1 year later, the goosebumps and everything. Take us, Shlomo, to 6:28 in the morning on October 7th.
Okay, so 6:28, I was still laying in bed. And as usual, my kids like to pile on top of me. And basically then we get woken up by a siren. So the initial thing going through our heads is like, okay, Hamas or somebody of that decided to fire off something in the meantime. No big deal, whatever. We deal with it every once in a while. And so it got us a bit nervous. We all got out of bed. We went to the hallway. And then after that, I started to hear over the radio, over the United Hatzalah radio, basically that there is some sort of attack going on. And also my phone, I always have my phone and my radio next to me. And I started to get like little bits of information, but thinking, you know what, it's not the biggest deal. We've been through this before.
We're used to it.
Unfortunately, in this neck of the woods, we're very used to, here in Jerusalem particularly, a lot of stabbing attacks, a lot of shooting attacks that are terror-based attacks. So we're used to it and we've learned to deal with it somewhat. In this particular situation, we decided, this is the day. Simchat Torah is like a very special day for my kids because it's a time that they stock up on candy for the rest of the year. So it's like, it's a time like they're ready. We have special bags with their names on it, very like cool bags and stuff like that. So we were all ready for it and they got dressed, ready to go. And so we started to head out towards the synagogue and the Beit Knesset, which is the synagogue. And once we went out there, another alarm happened, and that started to already it was like the whole idea was like this little tip, till we got to understand the gravity of the situation, and that was really the whole day in itself. It was just like this wave of insanity, like
it was a wave that kept growing,
exactly, like a huge, massive hurricane.
What time you understood that
how bad
something happened?
Okay, so once I basically got a message from Avi Marcus early in the morning, basically saying, "Listen, there's a lot of people that are it was in Hebrew,
eight and something,
yeah. That basically saying."
When Avi reached out to all the ALS responders,
yeah. So
the least.
Yeah.
The
so
least
basically that was that. I already understood there was like a mini invasion, but to get to the idea where he wrote that everyone's trapped, there's a bunch of people trapped and they may need some medical advice and help. Would you be willing to take phone calls? So that's like, okay, oh my gosh, there's something very different it was that really hit home. But then after that, I agreed right away to do that. And basically he sent me shortly thereafter, somebody that was trapped in a village called Kfar Aza, saying that this is the daughter's number. The father's been severely wounded. And, can you call to help give them advice?
And for those watching the previous episodes, if you'll go back to the morning episodes, you'll hear about Kfar Aza, how people could not get in, and our responders that did go in, for first response, ended
Came
up being
under fire.
trapped in Kfar Aza for hours until special forces were able to get in. Sorry, keep going.
Okay. So basically, in short, I picked up the phone. Obviously, like, okay, this sounds pretty bad. But just not prepared for how bad it was. So I speak to her and she's crying and she's saying, listen, my father was hit by an RPG, which is a rocket propelled grenade, and he's missing his arms and his legs, and he's bled out a lot, and he's going in and out of consciousness. So that's like, holy, first of all, this is not guns. We're talking about, grenades, things that are used by militaries.
These
to
are
attack.
shoulder missiles.
Basic, yeah, that's what
These
they are.
are shoulder
Rocket
missiles.
yeah, and it's quite intense. So I just made sure first, that they had tourniquets on, that things were done in the proper way as much as possible to treat him where he is. They told me they're in the safe room now, they're locked, and they're basically unable to get out. Is there any way that we can assist them in getting an ambulance there? So I said, okay, give me a few minutes. I'll call you right back once I made sure that they were dealing with things, as much as possible. I called Avi Marcus. I told him the situation. He says, I'll give you a number of he's like, right now we have no ability to get there. We're trying to send resources down there, but obviously it's a very active war zone.
It's a battle zone.
It's a battle zone.
And for those who don't know, in Kfar Aza, in the aftermath and the debriefs, over 300 terrorists, armed terrorists, with RPGs, with AK-47s and grenades, went in, and this was a battle zone that went on. And the battle there eventually only ended 3 days later.
Yeah, and it gets even worse because I basically called. There's this military hotline where I called to see if the military would be able to assist. The person picks up and I said, I explained who I was. I said, this is this and this. She said, I'm so sorry, but we're just not able to. We're literally not able to do anything. We're not in control of the area.
This is national meltdown.
And that is like where it took my breath away, where the point where I realized we're truly in a national crisis was at the point when they basically said that. And that, for an Israeli, it's a very traumatic thing because we are faced consistently with pressures around, national security pressures around, and we look to the Israeli army as our protector and as a first world amazing military, and we're just seeing it fall between our eyes, like, just fall down and not be able to hold up.
And you felt that you can't do nothing.
Right. And that was crazy. So I spoke to the army, I spoke to this representative, and they said, maybe just tell the people to make a run for it. And I'm like listening, the army, is telling them to make a run for it. So I said, you know what? We did enough time. I spent enough time with the army on the phone. I hung up. I called them back to say, we'll do what we can to get resources there. I'm gonna work for you to make sure that we can try to get them as soon as possible. But then after that, I was just gonna tell them to make a run for it. And then I just hear rapid machine gun fire behind them. So it was basically she said, like, listen, there's nowhere for us to go. We hear the fighting, and I was able to hear it over, So she's like, there's terrorists right outside our house.
I think that the first ambulances went inside, I don't know, 12 or 14 hours.
No.
After.
The first ambulances made it into Kfar Aza. Actually, they didn't make it in. They made it to the gate, and special forces brought out the victims in the later afternoon. This was when we'll be talking about your operations down there hours later in the day. I think it was around 4:00. Our first ambulances were able to make it to the gate.
To the gate
of Kfar Aza, which Kfar Aza is a small village. It's a kibbutz. It's a small village. 400 families. 400 families, small community, farming, that sort of thing, which is usually, like the most peaceful and quiet area.
Just to actually put it in perspective, many of these individuals that lived in Kfar Aza were very much peace activists who were people that would help bring Gazan children to hospitals. And I've treated in the hospital kids from Gaza that were brought by people from these places.
It was totally shocking on so many levels. So let's move on a little bit. And okay, when actually did you jump in the Jeep?
Okay.
And start heading south because
there was more calls after this call.
So basically,
it's interesting. Wait with the Jeep. Wait.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to get to the action.
Basically, this was. Basically, this was the main call, which really made me
Shook you.
realize
It shook you.
that things need to be done. So I finished this call, and then our own Ben Arush, which is he's
From Operations
from
Division.
Operations Division, who basically he called me and he said, "Listen, are you willing?" Listen, there's a lot of injured people, not enough people to treat. Would you be willing to go down south? I said, I'm at a synagogue right now. I'm just going to run home, speak with my wife, see if she's okay with it, and then if she's okay with it, I'll hop in my Jeep and I'll come down.
And at this point, you thought about, okay, I'm going south to an attack zone. I don't know,
war
a war zone.
So this is where it gets when I got home to my wife, I explained to my wife, and she, like, for me, I feel a sense of obligation. I live in this country where I'm a part of the community. We're always, one of the things about this organization is we're always servicing the community in difficult situations. And here it's like we're getting hit hard. For me, it wasn't even a question in my mind if to go down. It's as long as my wife was okay with it, I was going to do it. It could be a little bit of part of my craziness that I'm that type of individual.
I think one of
This
the
is the heroes.
secret sauces of secret spices of our sauce of United Hatzalah is being meshuggahers.
Yeah.
Being meshuggahers. Meshuggahers is crazy.
Crazy.
but the good kind of crazy. Really, and we see this throughout the day. I mean, you weren't here earlier when we were talking to Avi and to Liad and to Linor. It's people that simply don't even think twice. It wasn't a question to you.
Exactly. And I think they always say that the line between insanity and bravery is a very thin one. So that's something that definitely resonates with me. I believe in doing things in a proper manner. And we always learn this, like, in emergency services at the beginning, it's, BSI, scene safety. You always have to have scene safety. But there are times when you realize that you need to innovate. And this is, we're part of the nation of the startup nation. And what I think, United Hatzalah, which is so interesting about it, is that it's the startup EMS system within the startup nation, and which is something very interesting because there's a lot of innovation that comes out of this organization because we're willing to push the boundaries within the realm of normal medical, care, but we're willing to push the boundaries to do something that hasn't been done before. So just to circle back a little bit, so
you go to your wife.
I go to my wife, and she just looks at me and she's like, "This is our country under attack." And my wife is that type of individual.
Wow.
She's a doctor herself. She understands it. But for her, it was like not even a question. She's like, "Listen, stay safe as best as you can, but it's our country under attack." And I think this is, it wasn't also from my wife's perspective, she happens to also be a volunteer in the organization, but she's not as nearly as active as I am. She gives me the ability to be much more active.
She's a volunteer by being the support to you.
Yes, but she's also a doctor within it. But yeah, she's a massive, an amazing.
So she's what you would
individual.
call a second opinion.
Yes, very much. That's actually very true, and we do that very often. So we do that with all our medical, things. Hey, she'll call me up in the middle of the day about her patients, and I'll sometimes hey, what's your thoughts about that? So we do that a lot. Yeah,
Wow.
that's in fear. So basically, after that, I basically get all my gear together. I already had the anticipation that I was going to be down there for a while, and it was going to be something quite intense. I just dumped all my stuff that I thought I would potentially need. A couple pairs of scrubs, a couple pair of socks and a bunch of bars and stuff like that. And I called up another
And get a
EMT.
bulletproof vest and helmet.
That I always thought was the biggest joke in the world, that I had that in my Jeep. I was like, what am I ever going to use it for?
Wow.
And this was me being Mr. Naive. And it was in my car. I'm like, it's just a waste of space. And that day, it was the most, this is the foresight of the organization that I will say. They already assume we get these kind of things. No one knew the gravity of it, but having that bulletproof vest, aside from causing crazy back pains later on, but it was fantastic, to stay as safe as possible within the
Sense of security, at least.
A sense of security, because
I always say it's a sense of security.
it's a sense of security because when a rocket-propelled grenade, which is essentially a missile, is coming at you, the bulletproof vest doesn't really do very much for you. But there was plenty of people getting shot at throughout the day, and it came very handy throughout the day. So I basically called another EMT. I just wanted to have somebody else with me to be able to help me. A person by the name of Moishe Paskesz. And he hopped on. He got a bunch of good food from his wife as well, which she's a good baker. So it was good. We had some good extra baked goods along the way, and we just like what felt like it's, on Waze, nothing was working. None of the GPS systems
GPS were all blown out.
We're all blown out. So Moshe Paskesz is very savvy with all the tech stuff. So he was basically putting in for a few days ahead, and everywhere we would go, so it would just get us around all the blockages. So we basically just went down. And to me, driving down, was very surreal. It felt like what I envisioned Yom Kippur War, because the roads were empty.
Said what I told Dovie before.
Look at the goosebumps.
Yeah.
Look at the goosebumps.
I live in northern Israel, and when I went to the headquarters this morning, this Shabbat morning, so I have 150 of kilometer from my house to here, and I drove and with siren everything, but I was alone. Me and everybody was police officers, military cars, and soldiers, reserve with the blinkers, and like this was all the people on the roads.
Exactly,
was these people, and it was so surrealistic. You look around you, and everybody go south. No one go northern Israel. Everybody go to the south of Israel, and everybody are emergency teams and soldiers.
Yeah.
It was
felt the same. I think I spoke about this. I think when in the opening scene is that feeling of I described it as what I was raised on, of my parents describing the Yom Kippur War over here, and this was exactly 50 years and one day later.
And just to emphasize this, it's the entire day kept feeling more and more like this. That was just the beginning. And I commented to the person that I was with, to Moshe Paskesz, the EMT, like, this feels like you see no one's there. And exactly as you said, you see a few civilian cars with their blinkers on. You look inside, you see guys in military fatigues, and everyone's just heading south. But the roads are empty, and it's like this silence. And then as you start getting closer down there, you start to see the white streaks in the sky.
And the
smoke. So first you see the white streaks as we're coming down. So we said where we're going to go to. So
the white streaks in the sky are the missiles coming out of Gaza towards Israel.
And the
so that's
dome.
And the Iron Dome. The detonations.
So the thing is first we see the streaks coming up, and then you see the streaks coming and meeting, and that. First of all, like that when I say they have like the story of a frog, being put in a hot pot of water, but like if you put them in right away, they jump right out. So it was a slow cook up that we found the whole time, that it just kept getting these new realities just facing you throughout the entire day.
It feels like in a movie, like a bad movie.
The worst of a horror movie.
Yes.
And that's how basically eventually turned into. But as we drove down to the staging point of Tzomet Heletz, which is the area that
Heletz. We had Linor was here on the. You can check back at our episode with Linor, who was talking about the Heletz staging area and triage area that we opened up just north of Sderot. Which is about a 7-minute ride north of the southern city of Sderot.
The first secure stop after Sderot.
Yeah, but it's a good joke.
Or the last secure stop before Sderot.
Before Sderot, yeah.
Right, but I think that false sense, there was a big false sense of security in that area. So there was a staging area, which the organization set up, the operations side set up a staging area within a field. So we all came down there, and we all started to get our bulletproof vests on, helmets on, and you had like the sense of the last secure spot. There was one military police car there, and that was like and it wasn't very much like that. And then we were basically seeing the streaks flying up in the sky, and we were approached by the operations side of things and saying, listen, there's a lot of injured people, and there's just not enough resources. So however much you're willing to take on, like, we're supportive. We're in a crisis moment. We're not forcing anybody to do anything.
That was the decision that I spoke about when we were in here in this room, Elad. You don't know because you were down there. We were in here in this exact room where we're taping this podcast, and having a big discussion here, an argument. You mentioned the safety, scene safety first, and we understood that there is no one there, and there are hundreds of people injured. We didn't know as thousands at that point. And we made that decision. And we said, we're not going to force anyone. So it's interesting to hear it now from the other side of how it was presented to you in the field, that we're not forcing anyone. Sorry,
But
go ahead.
I personally think that decision was a brilliant decision in retrospect for a few reasons. Number one, when you're not first of all, you have a lot of dedicated volunteers, and people came from all over the country of all walks of life. And the fact is when you feel an organization has your back and you're doing good for people, and and the organization is telling you, it's not like this structural command that you obviously we have structure and command within the organization, but it was a point of, listen, we're in this together. And it made it a lot more of an ability for the individual provider to say, I'm willing to risk my life as well to help people, because there's no force, and I think it was a brilliant decision. I'll be honest, it takes a lot of guts on the part of the higher ups in the organization to have to make a decision like that, because no one knows what the consequences will be later. But I think in retrospect, it was the most amazing decision that could have been done. So thank you for that decision, because it definitely only, in my...
I'm glad you stayed alive.
Listen, I'm glad also. But we live to tell the tale, and I think one of the amazing things is this organization we went into some of the craziest, most difficult situations and dangerous places and made it out, for the most part.
So maybe since you mentioned that, and we're moving on in the day, give us one of those, the experience. I mean, going down there, driving on these roads, it really, more than anything, I think what would describe it is that sense of the apocalypse. Give it from your perspective, and maybe share also, for our professionals, a little bit about the actual decision making in the field there, under fire, while missiles are flying, while you see the RPGs, and making those decisions, which are literally life or death, and it's the most impossible situation to be in.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times we always try to, within normal EMS situations, we try to control our settings as much as possible. So if we see that in the field it's too chaotic and it's a terror attack, we try to get the person into the ambulance, in our own quote unquote office, that we can deal with our own terms. Everything like that went out the window. So just to give the idea, as Dovie said, the apocalypse, it's literally what we all said. So once we passed that quote unquote safe little police car that's sitting there,
it felt like a psychological barrier.
Exactly.
More than anything.
Yeah. And we went in, then you started to see cars strewn all over the place. This was the progression. First, you see cars just abandoned. And then we started heading down we were going to initially head to Ofakim, which is where the police station that was under attack.
Ofakim, I'll refer you guys again to the episode with Liad Ochana, in the morning hours of Ofakim, who treated there over 50 people were killed and hundreds injured and treated there in the police station.
So we were going to try to make our way over there because we heard that there was definitely a medical need for people down there. So we started heading down, and we were going to say, as long as we were going to find stuff along the way that we can treat and help, we were going to do that.
You didn't know what
we didn't know the gravity of what we would find. But just to give perspective, we were driving through Sderot, and there's like this manufacturer.
By the way, just 1 second, Doc. I highly recommend to our listeners to take a moment and find time to watch this episode so you can actually visualize and see live footage from our vehicles, from the cameras on our vehicles, of what this apocalypse and the description of the going on the roads, what it was like. Sorry, Doc.
And this road, the 232, that he goes from Heletz to Ofakim, one of the worst cases of
it was the war zone. It was swarming with terrorists.
Yeah. So just to give we were told already that they always have the possibility along the way of terrorists just coming off the side of the road. So we had our vests on. We all, a lot of us in emergency service here carry a small firearm, but we know that it's, in comparison to AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades, it's not really going to do that much. But we had them all at the ready. And we drove in, and we come by this manufacturing area of Sderot, and we see like a bunch of soldiers like hovering over like what appeared to be a body on the other side of the road. So we just made a quick U-turn because it was on the other side of the barrier, and we pulled off to the side, and we see this elderly-looking gentleman wearing, like he looked like a security guard in one of these manufacturing places, and he was laying face down, and next to him was like this Corkinet, which is like an electrical scooter, and we see a bunch of of shell casings around. So we wanted to, they said, can you come help? We took a look. He said, can you see if the guy's alive or anything like that? We see a bunch of entry points and he was laying face down. His leg was, just to be a little more, to explain like how bad it was, he was riddled with bullets. So at that point and his leg was deformed, semi-attached. I wanted to see, turn him over to see what there is to do. And we basically saw, as soon as you always have the entry point of any bullet wound is very small, but the exit point is where you see a lot of the definition. Basically, once we turned him over, we saw that there was zero ability, to treat him because his head was no longer in a treatable condition.
Yeah.
So that's that sat upon us, and his body was still warm. And they asked us there, what do you think? Do you think this happened recently? And you can see all the shell casings of these assault rifles laying all around his body. He felt pretty warm that it had happened pretty recently, and basically they quickly set up a perimeter, the soldiers that were there, and it looked like what I would say are the ragtag soldiers, the guys who came down from their homes, because guys are wearing their sneakers, they're wearing, they're not looking like their regular professional self, and they're setting up a perimeter. And then we basically made a quick decision. We said, listen, being very naive at that point, I have a stretcher in the back of my Jeep. Out of respect for the body, so you shouldn't sit out in the sweltering thing, we'll take the body back to the staging point, and the naivety of it, and we're all smiling because we just realized that afterwards, the amount of bodies that we saw afterwards, it was not even. It was feasible.
Driving through the apocalypse with hundreds of bodies. Along the roads, cars burnt, and just everywhere you go, it was death.
So exactly that. And what we did is we quickly brought his body back, and then we went right back in. And as we're driving we get to the end of Sderot to turn on to Netivot, to go on to the 232, that was when the real apocalypse hit. You see cars just strewn all out over the place. Bodies hanging out of cars. People just and that was the beginning of it. And driving down that road, I literally spent the whole way down avoiding bodies, and it's some of the most vivid, horrific scenes that you can imagine seeing. People looking like they were running away.
You can't imagine.
No,
it's unfathomable that you're driving down kilometers over kilometers, swerving between. I mean, this is you can't even begin to imagine. And this is how you spend the next 24 hours, basically.
Yeah, and it was complete barbarism that you saw, because you saw that these were civilians who were trying to get away, to save their lives at all costs. And, and they had no ability to do it. And you could see that they were executed by the side of their cars. And we're just looking, we're medical professionals. We want to help people. We don't want to just see dead people. And the whole time we're just searching, and we're driving and everyone's dead. And it was
you stopped.
Well, we were looking, as it was quite obvious that they were, without getting into the graphic details, they were killed so brutally that it was very obvious that who was alive and who wasn't. So we drove all the way down from Sderot to Netivot. And once at that point, we made the decision, there was another ambulance there that basically said, if you would turn down the road that goes towards all the Gaza border villages, I always forget the number of the road. This is always but it turns from Netivot and it goes down past Shuva, Be'eri, Kfar Aza,
and we'll talk about Shuva, because that really is, I think, where your the major operation that you ran was down in Shuva. So we'll try to. This is already around. We're talking about around 4:00 in the afternoon, down by Shuva, when you are done getting around. But we understand the victims are coming out from the different kibbutzim, from the fields, from those who ran from the Nova Festival, and they're coming out to the roads there. So essentially, you were asked to get to Shuva area there.
So just to give a little perspective, we started off at the edge of Netivot, which is the road, the beginning of that road, and there were just people coming, and there was a barrier there where the police were there, and they were saying beyond this, there's active fighting going on right now on the road. We were able to see a car that was a police car that the terrorists had taken over. and basically they had killed the police officers, and then they got into a massive firefight with the local police in that area. And we were able to see the car right there, and it was like, there was off to the side. So you're able to, and you're hearing rapid gunfire. You're hearing missiles flying up in the air. So while we were there was a bus stop there. One of our volunteers, he's a guy, I don't know his name, but he was a paramedic. It was there since 6 a.m. by that it was a bus stop right next to Netivot. And then we just started having cars coming with people on the back of pickup trucks, like civilians, soldiers. We had every different type of thing. And it's interesting. I've been seeing trickling back some of the videos where from the dash cams of like stuff that where we were at while these missile attacks were happening. And we started just treating, and it was just like one after the other. So normally in emergency services, you get your call, you go to your patient, even if it's a mass casualty incident. So you have to deal with that restricted area, but here it's just like consistently coming in droves, and each wound would be considered a severe call in itself. Your least wound is somebody has their hand blown off by a bullet, by a bullet wound. So at that point, just to give a perspective from the medical perspective, we're dealing with rockets falling along the side of us, and even during one of the things, a rocket landed two blocks over from where we were standing. You hear like the rocket alarms. At the beginning, we're all ducking down. We're going into these little bomb shelter things, and then after a while, it's like, it's useless.
That's the crazy part. You simply have rockets flying around you at a certain point and just continue treating the patients.
Exactly.
That's it, because you otherwise you're not going to be able to treat the patients.
Exactly, because it was so consistent.
So you were down by Shuva. Shuva is another kibbutz there, a little village, which essentially you created another staging area, an ad hoc staging area like we did in Heletz. And I remember getting the call from you, or one of the guys that was with you, to send down equipment to there, and we sent one of the mass casualty response vehicles,
which was amazing.
It's like a truck that pulls up, and those watching will be able to see some footage from there. And this truck is full with it's got 10 ALS bags, 20 BLS bags, stretchers, tourniquets, generators, lighting systems,
stuff that would be enough
everything
to supply many emergency systems for a very long time. But just to give perspective, it got used up within like that.
Yeah.
And just to say, so when we came down from Netivot, we decided we needed to get closer to the source of where things were going. At first, the police officers were trying to tell us don't, but then we kept hearing from the people at Shuva that they needed medical care, and they needed advanced medical care. So that's when we decided to go further. And as we're going, we're feeling like shrapnel beneath our car. You're hearing the crunching of the tires as you're driving over debris. We get to Shuva, and we see that, they really need stuff. And at that point, I had bled through all my equipment. Like, I have a very well-stocked, truck. But in very little time, it got very, we basically, so I had to call for resupply, and I called, and I ran out of all of my narcotics, like ketamine, fentanyl, and we're seeing severely wounded individuals who are in a lot of pain, and at the same time as seeing horrific things, we also saw a tremendous amount of bravery on many individuals, whether it's Israeli soldiers, whether it was civilians, and throughout. But the point is, we were just clearly running out. So I put the phone call in, and I said, listen, we're out of stuff. We really need stuff. Is there any way to get it? And that's when I wasn't as aware of this amazing preparation of this special operations vehicle.
We were here. We got the call that Gensler needs the MCRV, and he's setting up a triage area there. And we sent the cavalry, basically.
So, and it was amazing, because what we did is, on the side of the road, on the outside of this small village of Shuva, we basically put stretchers, we set up 4 trauma beds that were just ready and lined up. And we put the BLS, all the basic life support bags, on one side so that the EMTs would be ready to easily access it. And then we had all the 10 ALS bags set up on that side. And not only that.
And you don't know what's incoming. You just, car after car, whether military vehicle or civilian vehicles with their hazard lights on, with victims, all gunshot wounds, blast injuries, pulling up there, coming from, we're talking about an area of 25 kilometers that was funneling down to where you were.
And that was the main artery out. So
it was the only one out, because it's the only one that actually goes out either south towards Soroka Hospital.
Right.
or the detour to go north to the other hospitals.
And that was the first medical stop
Yeah.
of these people.
So basically what we were doing is triaging. We decided what we're going to do is triage and treat vital injuries that the person wouldn't be otherwise able to, make it to the hospital. Obviously there's limited, you can't do a full open operation on a person, but whether it's requiring to secure, the way in emergency services, it always starts airway, breathing, circulation. And you always go back to that. Even in the hospital, it's, I'm on the crash team in the intensive care, and anything that goes around, you always go back to airway, breathing, circulation. And that required, whether it was to start doing intubations on people that had upper airway burns that couldn't breathe, people that, their airways were compromised because they had been shot in the face or things like that, or whether, blast injuries, and there's many, I treated a lot, and there's a lot that it's hard to honestly remember every specific individual case, but I can remember specific cases because they stood out as a little bit different. So, there were a lot of foreign workers that were working down there. Farmers, and they were getting injured. And a lot of them were Thai, of Thai background or Filipino background. And I just remember this one guy had beautiful long hair, it's just really long hair.
It stood out.
And it stood out, but he couldn't breathe. And I put it like he was crashing. And medically, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And I just quickly put my stethoscope to both lungs, and I hear just one side, absent of ear. And then I look at his throat, and I start seeing, his trachea deviating, his airway deviating. So textbook. So I quickly take a decompression needle, and then. And you hear that beautiful sound
life going back into him.
Exactly. His blood pressure was crashing and all that stuff. And that basically sums up the day of how things were going. We would have to run through from patient to patient to patient and say, what could we do right now to change this guy's life?
And we need to remember that there are no ambulances next to you, or I don't know, one or two ambulances.
So just to put, there were ambulances. The only ambulances that were there were our organization's ambulances, because the conventional emergency services was they forbade them from
going into the hot zones
because they said we're civilian and therefore we can't go there. But what was seen was that literally there's people sitting there, and we knew this, and I knew this from the phone calls, that there's people trapped and they have no way out.
Exactly.
And then what ended up happening is the United Hatzalah ambulances, our organizations, started to come with 6, 7, 8 patients, but we're not talking about patients with a little boo-boo. They're all critical patients.
Multiple gunshots. We're talking about tourniquets on multiple arms and legs, and until what time? I mean, we're moving on in time in the day, and the episode is coming to an end. Unfortunately, we could talk for hours, Shlomo, because you have just talking over this past year. I got hundreds of stories from you. It's unbelievable. I mean, we can't even encounter how many people we actually treated. Until what time were you there in Shuva, and then on? When did you actually end up getting home?
Shuva was basically from about 3. It was hard to know the exact timing, but about 3 all the way, and we were treating people there consistently. I was down south up until 7 a.m. the next morning.
Exactly.
So, but throughout in Shuva itself, afterwards we went on to
till around
Be'eri.
9 p.m. I think it was
even further. No, it till 1 a.m. or somewhere there.
So at Shuva till 7 a.m.
He went to Be'eri afterwards. To the gate of Be'eri for we'll talk about that with Sivan in our next episode, which will be very shortly, and.
But basically there at Shuva, it was consistent treating. It wasn't like it would come in these waves. They'd free up people.
They'd free up one village or release a few houses.
And then a wave of individuals. And then throughout, there were soldiers coming. And at the just one story about the bravery that I saw at Shuva. I remember there was a whole bunch of wounded soldiers. They basically came on the back of a big truck, of one of these flatbed army trucks, that they brought them out and they put them all down one by one in our triage area. And we were deciding, because we were working together with the army, there's a special unit called 669,
the airborne rescue unit.
The equivalent in the US of the PJs, that basically were landing right next to us, and we were deciding who's most most critical, they were going to go on, and we were working together with the military to do that. And there was one soldier there, and they were both severely wounded. They were both somewhat conscious, and the guy turns over. They all had it's called Actics. It's the weirdest
lollipops.
The lollipops, these fentanyl lollipops, to see how happy they would be, like, a leg blown off, but they had an Actic, and so the guy turns over, and he's like, the guy next to me is more injured than me. Take him first. And that was like, that epitomizes the day and the way people were. So these are very, very tough situations. I mean, the stories can go on for hours and hours, but this is basically what it was like, and it was consistent treating. And what I thought was amazing is the ability to innovate in such a difficult situation, and meaning throughout the organization. It started from the agility and being able to be that startup organization that's able to take a difficult situation and do it amazingly.
Wow. Dr. Shlomo Gensler. I mean, we're wrapping up this. So many chills and goosebumps, just thinking back a year later now. We're wrapping up at 9 a.m., 9:04 p.m., sorry. And Shuva, you went on throughout the night and only made it home the next day. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come to share a little bit, like a drop in the sea of the heroic acts that you did down there. And I hope that our viewers and listeners can appreciate what true heroism is for saving lives selflessly to help other people. And thank you for that. And thank you for being part of this amazing organization.
Thank you. And I just to reiterate, it's not, I wouldn't say like I myself am a hero. I think together,
I'll say it.
No, what I'll say is together as an organization, we all made it together, because no one individual can do all the work together. You need a full system to make it happen. So I'm lucky to be part of an organization that gives that ability and gives the liberty and the ability for us to be able to create that. So thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's definitely a big pleasure to be part of
Thank you, John. We'll let you go. Get back to the intensive care and trauma center. So just to recap, I mean, this is a little bit longer episode because we could go on for hours, and we're on. I invite you all to listen to our next episode with Sivan Mashiach, a paramedic which left her home as well early on the morning of October 7th. In the meantime, thank you for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe. And connect on social media and follow us. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks.